In 1877, the richest man in America died. His estate was worth roughly $105 million, more than the entire U.S. Treasury held at the time. 96 years later, 120 of his descendants gathered for a family reunion. Not one was a millionaire. Left invested and mostly untouched, that fortune would have been worth around $4.5 billion, about $38 million per person in the room. They had nothing. It wasn't a market crash. It wasn't the estate tax. Everyone's first guess. Let me earn that claim. The Vanderbilts were destroyed by the absence of something the families who keep their money all share, and the same gap quietly drains ordinary wealth today. So let's build it. The structures that decide whether money survives you, and the math behind each one. Most people blame taxes. The government takes half when you die, then again when your kids die, until there's nothing left. For almost everyone watching, that's wrong. As of a 2025 change, the federal estate tax exemption is $15 million per person, $30 million per married couple, now permanent and indexed to inflation. Below that line, it's zero, unless you plan to die with more than $15 million. The estate tax isn't what unravels what you built. Yet families at every level, 100,000, a million, 20 million, watch their money evaporate within 2 or 3 generations. One asterisk. Around a dozen states levy their own estate tax, some biting as low as 1 or 2 million, but even there the rates are a fraction of what people fear. So if it isn't the tax man, what is it? Wealth bleeds out through structural gaps most people never close, assuming those tools are for the ultra-rich or later. What follows are the systems of families who actually keep money have quietly used for a century, and it comes down to math you can check on a single page. One number decides whether money is temporary or permanent, and almost no one is taught it. Take any estate. It earns some return each year after inflation. Economists call it a real return. Say 5%, a reasonable long-run figure. As long as withdrawals stay below what the money earns, the pile grows forever. The moment they exceed it, a countdown begins with a fixed end date. $2 million earning 5% throws off $100,000 a year. Live on that, and the money is effectively immortal. Spend a little more and watch. At $120,000, only 20% over the line, that same $2 million runs dry in about 37 years. At $150,000, gone in around 23. At $200,000, double the sustainable figure. It hits zero in roughly 15 years. One generation, and a fortune meant to last forever is a memory. This scales both ways. 1 million at 5% has a sustainable line of 50,000 a year. Spend 60,000, again 20% over, and it runs dry in that same 37 years. What matters is the percentage overspent, not the pile size. Size only changes how long the countdown takes. Real portfolios don't earn a flat 5% forever, and a bad sequence of returns early on hurts more than the same bad years arriving late. But the core direction holds regardless. And overspending is one of the major dynamics historians point to in the family from the start of this video. They spent lavishly for decades, far past what even a $100 million fortune could earn in a year. Every system that follows keeps the family on the right side of that line, or protects the pile from shocks that yank it across. First, families who keep wealth don't hand assets to their children as personal property. They place assets inside a trust, a holding company, a family entity, and children receive a relationship to that structure, not a stack of shares with their name on it. The myth is that splitting a fortune among heirs is what destroys it. Not true. 2 million in one pool spending at its limit, and that same 2 million split 3 ways into shares of about 667,000 each, spending proportionally, reach zero at the exact same moment. The math doesn't care how many accounts hold it. Why does structure matter? Discipline. When heirs each own their slice outright, nobody watches a combined total, and spending drifts past what the pool earns. One structure measured against one number fixes that. Access. A large pool often keeps more of its return than a small one does, through lower fees as percentage, broader diversification, and access to investments a single small share can't reach. That gap in what's actually kept short in survival for the smaller share. Protection. Assets held personally are exposed to lawsuits, divorces, and creditors. Held inside a structure, they're insulated, so one member's bad decade doesn't drain the whole. The family behind one of the world's largest retail chains holds at stake to a single-family entity rather than shares split among relatives, concentrating control while spreading the benefit. The same logic scales down to a single house, personal property to be squabbled over, or a structure with rules, which brings us to ownership versus control. Picture a business with 3 equal partners, each free to sell their third whenever they like. It feels fair. It's a time bomb. The day one sells to an outsider, the others are in business with a stranger who can block decisions. And because the stake is liquid, the business becomes a target for creditors, lawsuits, and divorces. The fix isn't making selling impossible. Sometimes someone genuinely needs out. The fix is transfer restrictions. You can't hand your stake to an outsider on a whim, and a right of first refusal gives a family first chance to buy you out fairly. Notice what this solves. The real problem usually isn't needing cash. It's access to cash. When one of the world's most famous entrepreneurs moved to buy a major social media company, he didn't liquidate his company. He borrowed against stock he already held. Anyone can run a smaller version of that same move. The third system would have saved the most family fortunes in history, and it costs nothing but writing things down. Picture 2 brothers who inherit a company worth $5 million. No written rules, just good intentions. One wants to reinvest, the other wants his cash out now. Then a divorce hits, or a creditor comes calling, and with no rules for handling a member who needs money, the only lever left is selling the whole thing. A company sold under pressure rarely fetches what it's worth. Say, illustratively, 60 cents on the dollar. 5 million becomes 3. 2 million. 40% of everything. Gone, not because the business was bad, but because there were no rules for a bad moment. That page of rules has a name, a family constitution. It spells out how a member takes a distribution, how they can borrow against their share, how someone who needs out gets bought out fairly, and above all, that no single person can force a sale in a hard moment. The best time to write it is when you set the assets up. The second best is when everyone's calm. The third is today. The last system is about people, and it's the one families skip most. Some families avoid paying kids for routine chores. Word it teaches that work is the unpleasant thing you endure to get paid, a lesson that can compound into an heir who sees family money as an escape from work rather than a responsibility to steward. That's the kind of heir who tends to spend past the line. Families who last route a child's genuine interest into a small, real project with real stakes. So the lesson flips. Money is what you earn by creating something the world wants, and managing it well is itself a practice skill. 3 things are worth passing down. In order, passion, because interest keeps someone in the game, skills, the ability to build and create value, alongside handling money itself. And character, the sense that something larger than yourself exists, which is where real generosity comes from. Back to that reunion table. 120 descendants, not a millionaire among them, against a fortune that, left alone, could have handed each of them tens of millions. No crash did that. No tax collector did that. There was no structure holding total spending under what the money earned. So decade after decade, they spent past the line, and the countdown ran. There was no discipline coordinating the family as one. So each branch spent to its own lifestyle, with nobody watching the sum, and no one had been trained to see it coming, because the money had always simply been there. For failures, spending, structure, access, stewardship, and each had a fix that existed then, and exists now. None requires $100 million. Say a family builds a paid-off house and an $800,000 portfolio. At 5% real return, their line is $40,000 a year, indefinitely. Put that inside a structure with a rule that spending never crosses a line, that no single heir can force the house sold, and that the next generation is taught to manage it, and that modest estate can outlive everyone listening to this. Skip all 4. Split the house 3 ways with no rules, and it's sold within a decade to settle the first real disagreement. Same money, opposite outcomes. The only variable is structure. That's what generational wealth actually is. Not a dynasty trust and a private island. A family that knows its number, and a structure that keeps it under that number after you're gone. Your survival line isn't the Vanderbilts. It's yours. What you hold, what it earns, what your family spends, and how it gets split. But there's a question we haven't answered. Why do some people never build real wealth in the first place? Not luck, not income. A small set of laws govern how wealth is actually created, and once you see them, you can't unsee them.